Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Number the signal, I never liked heights. That's the first thing you should know about me. The second is that I never should have taken this job. When the National Weather Service offered me the position at Black Rock Mountain Station, I was desperate. 3 months behind on rent, a mountain of credit card debt, and the lingering shame of my meteorology degree gathering dust while I made lattes for suburban moms. The pay was good, surprisingly good, and the isolation didn't bother me. 6 months in a remote weather station in northern Montana seemed like the perfect reset. It's mostly automated now, my supervisor, Dr. Reeves, had explained during my orientation. You're just there to maintain the equipment, log any anomalies, and make sure nothing breaks down. The station uploads data every 6 hours to the central server. What he didn't mention was the tower. The massive 300-foot radio tower that loomed over the station like a skeletal finger pointing accusingly at the sky. It was old, built in the 1950s, and technically decommissioned. At least that's what my paperwork said. Oh, that thing, Dr. Reeves had said dismissively when I asked about it. Legacy equipment. We keep it maintained for emergency communications, but it's not part of your duties. Just leave it alone. I arrived at Black Rock in October. The station itself was a squat concrete building with small windows and a flat roof, nestled in a clearing surrounded by dense pine forest. The nearest town was Clearwater, about 40 miles away, a 3-hour drive on treacherous mountain roads. My supplies would be delivered monthly by helicopter, weather permitting. The inside of the station was surprisingly comfortable. A small but functional kitchen, a decent bathroom with a shower, a bedroom with a twin bed, and the main room filled with monitoring equipment, computers, and weather instruments. Solar panels and a backup generator provided power. My first week passed uneventfully. I followed the routine, checked the instruments at 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and midnight, log any unusual readings, perform basic maintenance. And otherwise I was free to read, watch movies on the small TV, or hike the surrounding trails. It was during one of those hikes that I first noticed something odd about the tower. I'd wandered about a mile from the station, following a deer trail through the pines, when I emerged into a small clearing that offered a perfect view of the station and the tower beside it. I stopped to catch my breath, and that's when I heard it, a faint humming sound, almost at the edge of perception. I looked up at the tower. The late afternoon sun glinted off its metal frame, and I could see the small red light at the top blinking steadily. That wasn't right. The tower was decommissioned. There shouldn't be any lights. When I returned to the station, I checked the documentation again. Sure enough, the tower was listed as non-operational, maintained only for emergency use. Yet the light was on, and when I stepped outside that night, I could see it blinking rhythmically in the darkness. The next morning, I radioed Dr. Reeves. The tower light is active, I told him. I thought it was decommissioned. There was a long pause before he responded. It's automated, he said finally. Aviation safety, don't worry about it. But I can hear it humming sometimes. Is it transmitting something? Another pause. Look, Mitchell, just focus on your weather readings. The tower isn't your concern. I should have left it at that, but curiosity has always been my downfall. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind had picked up, whistling around the corners of the station, and with it came that humming sound again. I got up, pulled on my boots and jacket, and stepped outside. The night was clear, stars sprinkled across the black sky like diamond dust. The tower's red light blinked steadily overhead. The humming was louder now, a low vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. I walked toward the base of the tower, my flashlight beam bouncing off the metal structure. The base of the tower was surrounded by a chain-link fence with a padlocked gate. A faded sign warned, "Government property, no trespassing." I shone my light through the fence at the small equipment shed inside the perimeter. Nothing seemed unusual except the humming was definitely coming from there. I returned to the station and searched through the key ring I'd been given. None of them were labeled for the tower, but I found a small key that didn't seem to fit anything in the station. On a hunch, I pulled on my jacket again and went back to the tower. The key fit the padlock perfectly. Inside the fence, the humming was more pronounced. I approached the equipment shed cautiously, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. The door was metal, weathered by decades of Montana winters. It opened with a protesting creak. Inside, I expected to find old, dusty equipment. Instead, I discovered a clean, well-maintained room with modern electronics. A bank of servers hummed quietly against one wall. Lights blinked on various consoles. A computer monitor glowed blue in the darkness, displaying what looked like a spectrogram, a visual representation of sound frequencies. This was definitely not abandoned equipment. As I stared at the monitor, the pattern on the spectrogram shifted. The humming sound changed pitch slightly, becoming more rhythmic, almost like Morse code. No, it was too complex for that. The patterns pulsed and shifted in ways that seemed almost intentional. I backed out of the shed, locked it, and returned to the station. That night I dreamed of the tower. In my dream, it grew taller and taller, reaching beyond the clouds, beyond the atmosphere, into the cold darkness of space. And something was climbing down it. The next day I checked the weather readings as usual, but my mind kept returning to the tower. What was it transmitting, and to whom? I tried calling Dr. Reeves again, but the radio just produced static. The satellite phone wasn't working either. Probably the weather, I told myself. A storm was moving in. That evening, as darkness fell and the first snowflakes began to swirl outside the windows, I sat at my computer and began researching. The station had a small library of technical manuals, and I found one for radio transmission equipment similar to what I'd seen in the shed. I also had limited internet access via satellite, though it was painfully slow. What I discovered was troubling. Black Rock Mountain had been more than a weather station in the past. During the Cold War, it had been part of a network of listening posts, monitoring for Soviet transmissions. But according to the official records, that operation had been shut down in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell. So why was the equipment still active? And why had it been upgraded with modern technology? The snow intensified overnight, and by morning the station was surrounded by 2 feet of fresh powder. The wind howled around the building, but beneath that sound I could still hear the tower humming. It seemed louder now, more insistent. I tried the radio again, nothing but static. The satellite phone remained dead. I was completely cut off. That's when I noticed something else. The weather instruments were showing impossible readings. The barometric pressure fluctuated wildly, dropping to levels that should have indicated a massive hurricane, then shooting up to readings typical of the highest mountaintops. The temperature sensors outside showed -40 one minute, then +10 the next. The wind speed gauge was spinning so fast it was a blur, yet when I looked outside, the snow was falling straight down, no wind at all. I checked the connections, rebooted the systems, even went outside to physically inspect the instruments. Everything seemed to be working correctly, yet the readings continued their impossible dance. That night, the humming from the tower changed. It became a pulsing, rhythmic sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls of the station. I found myself unable to sleep, lying in bed with my hands pressed over my ears, trying to block it out. But it wasn't just in my ears, I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. At 3:17 a.m., I remember the time exactly because I was staring at the digital clock beside my bed. The power went out. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the noise had been. I lay in the darkness, my breath forming clouds in the suddenly frigid air. Then I heard it, footsteps on the roof. Heavy, deliberate steps moved across the flat concrete surface above my head. Thump, 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 pause, then a scraping sound like something being dragged. I told myself it was just the snow shifting, or perhaps branches from a nearby tree. But I knew there were no trees close enough to touch the roof. The backup generator kicked in with a rumble and the lights flickered back on. The footsteps stopped immediately. I got out of bed, pulled on my clothes with shaking hands, and grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. The main room looked normal. The computers were rebooting, the weather instruments resetting themselves. Outside, the snow continued to fall silently. I checked every room in the small station, finding nothing unusual. Then I looked out the window toward the tower. The red light at the top was no longer blinking. Instead, it glowed steadily, brighter than before, and it wasn't red anymore, it was blue. I stood at the window, watching that blue light, unable to look away. It seemed to pulse slightly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. Or was my heart adjusting to match its rhythm? I don't know how long I stood there, mesmerized, but I was jolted back to awareness by a sharp crackling from the radio. I rushed to it, hoping it was Dr. Reeves or anyone from the outside world. Instead, I heard a voice I didn't recognize, distorted, distant, speaking words I couldn't understand. The language wasn't English or any other language I recognized. The cadence was wrong, the phonemes impossible for a human throat to produce. The transmission lasted exactly 1 minute, then cut off. The tower's light returned to its normal red blinking. I spent the rest of the night documenting everything in my log, though I doubted anyone would believe me. When morning came, I tried again to contact the outside world. The radio produced nothing but static. The satellite phone remained dead. The internet connection was gone. The snow had stopped at least. I decided to hike down the mountain to Clearwater. It would be dangerous in these conditions, but I needed answers and human contact. I packed a backpack with water, food, my satellite phone, useless as it seemed, a compass, and a map. I dressed in layers, put on my heaviest boots, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a physical blow. My weather instruments had said it was -5 degrees, but it felt much colder. The snow crunched under my boots as I started walking down the access road that led eventually to the highway. I'd gone perhaps half a mile when I realized something was wrong. The compass was spinning wildly, unable to find north. The familiar landmarks I'd noted during my hikes, a distinctive rock formation, a bent tree, weren't where they should be. The landscape looked similar but subtly wrong, like a dream version of the real thing. I turned back, following my own footprints in the snow. They led straight back to the station, but something was different. The tower seemed taller somehow, its metal skeleton stretching higher into the pale blue sky than I remembered. When I reached the station, I immediately checked the weather instruments. They had stabilized but were showing readings that made no sense for Montana in October. The temperature was now a balmy 68 degrees, despite the snow outside and the breath that still clouded in front of my face. The barometric pressure indicated that I was somehow both at sea level and at 30,000 feet simultaneously. I went back to the tower. The humming had stopped, but as I approached the fence, I felt a vibration through the soles of my boots. The equipment shed door was ajar, though I was certain I'd locked it. Inside, the servers were silent. The monitor that had shown the spectrogram was dark, but on the floor I found something that hadn't been there before. A small, metallic object about the size of a coin. It was perfectly circular, with strange markings etched into its surface. When I picked it up, it was warm to the touch and seemed to vibrate slightly, like a tuning fork. I pocketed it and returned to the station. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I tried every hour to make contact with the outside world, with no success. That night, I examined the metal disc more closely. The markings weren't like any alphabet I recognized. They seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new patterns. I fell asleep with the disc clutched in my hand. The dream came again. The tower stretching into space, something climbing down, but this time I could see it more clearly. Not human, not animal, something that seemed to bend and twist in ways that hurt my eyes to look at. It moved with a terrible purpose. I woke gasping, my hand burning. I opened my fist to find the metal disc glowing bright blue, the same color as the tower's light had been. The markings were definitely moving now, flowing like liquid across its surface. I dropped it onto the bedside table, where it continued to glow for several seconds before fading to its normal metallic sheen. The next day, I think it was day. Time had become strangely elastic. I hiked to the clearing where I'd first heard the tower humming. The view was different now. The tower dominated the landscape, seeming impossibly tall, and the station looked wrong. The concrete walls bulged in places, as if something inside was pushing outward. I took out my phone and tried to take a picture, but the screen showed only static. When I looked up from the phone, the station appeared normal again. I blinked, and for a moment I saw it bulging again, pulsing like a heart. I ran back, my feet slipping on the snow, my lungs burning in the thin air. When I reached the station, everything looked normal. I went inside and immediately checked the weather readings. The instruments showed that it was simultaneously day and night, summer and winter, storming and clear. The digital displays flickered between impossible numbers. Temperatures in the thousands of degrees, wind speeds that would have flattened the building, humidity percentages in the negative numbers, and the tower was humming again. Not the mechanical hum of electronics, but something that sounded almost vocal, as if the tower itself were singing. I tried the radio one more time. Through the static, I heard a voice, Dr. Reeves. Mitchell, are you there? We've lost your data feed. Is everything operational? Dr. Reeves, I shouted into the microphone. Something's wrong here. The tower, it's active. The readings are impossible. I need extraction. A pause, then, what tower, Mitchell? My blood ran cold. The radio tower, the 300-foot tower next to the station. Another pause. Mitchell, there is no tower at Blackrock Station. There never has been. I dropped the microphone and ran to the window. The tower stood exactly where it had always been, its red light blinking steadily in the fading daylight. I'm looking at it right now, I said, picking up the microphone again. Mitchell listened to me carefully. Dr. Reeves's voice had changed, become more urgent. Your readings for the past week have shown severe atmospheric anomalies. We think you might be experiencing altitude sickness or carbon monoxide poisoning. We're sending a helicopter as soon as the weather clears. There's something coming down the tower, I said, my voice barely a whisper. What, Mitchell, you're not making sense. It's been climbing down from space. Every night it gets closer, I think. I think it's almost here. The radio erupted in static, then went silent. I spent that night barricaded in the bathroom, the only room without windows. I could hear the humming through the walls, could feel the vibration in the porcelain of the sink, the tiles beneath my feet. The metal disc in my pocket grew warmer, almost hot enough to burn. In the morning, I emerged to find the station transformed. The walls pulsed visibly now, the concrete flowing like wax. The computers displayed only the strange symbols from the metal disc, scrolling endlessly across their screens. Outside, the tower's light was blue again, but now the entire structure glowed with the same eerie light. The radio crackled to life without me touching it. The same inhuman voice from before spoke, but this time I could understand it, not with my ears, but somehow directly in my mind. Receiver operational. Dimensional anchor established, gateway opening. I ran outside, desperate to escape, only to stop dead in my tracks. The landscape had changed completely. The familiar pine forest was gone. In its place was a twisted, alien terrain, rock formations that defied gravity, vegetation that moved with apparent intelligence, and a sky that was no longer blue but a deep, swirling violet. The tower now reached into that alien sky, disappearing into a swirling vortex of clouds. And climbing down it, now clearly visible, was the entity from my dreams. It moved with a terrible grace, its form constantly shifting. Sometimes it appeared almost human, then would twist into something insectal, then reshape into something for which I have no words. But its purpose was unmistakable. It was coming for me. I ran back into the station and grabbed the metal disc from my pocket. It was burning hot now, the symbols on its surface moving so quickly they blurred. On impulse, I placed it on top of the main computer console. The effect was immediate. The disc melded with the console, spreading across its surface like liquid metal. The computer screens flickered, then displayed a countdown, 10 o'clock, 9:59, 9:58. The humming from the tower changed pitch, becoming a wail that set my teeth on edge. Through the window, I could see the entity pause in its descent, its form rippling with what might have been uncertainty. I had no idea what would happen when the countdown reached 0, but I knew I couldn't stay in the station. I grabbed my backpack, still packed from my aborted hike, and ran outside. The alien landscape had shifted again. Now it seemed to flicker between the normal Montana wilderness and the twisted, violet-skied otherworld. Reality itself was becoming unstable. I ran toward the forest, or what had been the forest, my feet sometimes crunching on snow, sometimes splashing through a strange, viscous liquid that might have been water but wasn't. Behind me, the tower's wail grew louder. I looked back once. The entity had reached the ground. It stood at the base of the tower, its form constantly shifting, but its attention fixed unmistakably on me. It began to move in my direction, not walking or running, but flowing across the ground like a living shadow. I ran faster, the landscape flickering around me. Sometimes I was in dense pine forest, sometimes in that alien terrain, sometimes in a place that was neither, a gray void where distances made no sense and direction was meaningless. The countdown in my mind reached 0. There was no explosion, no dramatic collapse. The tower simply folded, not down but inward, collapsing into itself like a piece of paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. The entity screamed, a sound that existed not in the air but in my mind, a psychic shriek of rage and pain. The world snapped back into focus. I was standing in the pine forest, the snow crunching beneath my boots, the cold Montana air filling my lungs. Behind me, where the station and tower had stood, there was nothing but an empty clearing. Relief flooded through me. It was over. Whatever had happened, hallucination, interdimensional intrusion, complete mental breakdown, it was finished. I could make my way down to Clearwater, contact Dr. Reeves, get help. I turned to begin the long hike down the mountain, and froze. Standing before me was Dr. Reeves, but not Dr. Reeves as I had known him. His form rippled slightly at the edges, like heat distortion above hot asphalt. His smile was too wide, his eyes reflecting a light that wasn't there. "Mitchell," he said, his voice overlapping with itself, as if multiple people were speaking simultaneously. "Did you really think it would be that simple?" I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. "What are you?" "We are the signal," Reeves said, "and you are the receiver. The gateway is closed, yes, but not before we came through. What do you want?" I managed to ask, though my throat had gone dry with fear. The thing wearing Reeves's face smiled wider, its mouth stretching beyond what should have been physically possible. To exist, to experience, to spread. It took a step toward me, and I saw that its feet didn't quite touch the snow. "Your world is interesting, so solid, so limited. We will change that." I turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I was in another clearing. Before me stood the tower, not as it had been, not the old radio tower from the 1950s. This was something new, something growing out of the earth like a metallic plant. Its structure was organic, fluid, constantly shifting. And at its top, a blue light pulsed in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. I fell to my knees in the snow. In the distance, I could see the lights of Clearwater twinkling in the valley below. So close. Safety was so close. But I knew the truth now. There was no escape. The signal had found its receiver, me, and through me it had anchored itself to this world. The countdown hadn't stopped it. It had only changed its form. I felt a presence behind me and turned to see Reeves standing there, still smiling that impossible smile. "Don't be afraid, Mitchell," it said, its voice echoing strangely in the clearing. "You won't be alone. Soon everyone will hear the signal." It gestured toward the town below. As I watched in horror, blue lights began to appear throughout Clearwater, first one, then another, then dozens, hundreds, spreading like a virus through the town. "What have you done?" I whispered. "We've only just begun," Reeves replied. "Look up, Mitchell, look at your stars." I raised my eyes to the night sky. The familiar constellations were there, but between them, almost imperceptible unless you knew to look for them, were tiny blue lights. Hundreds of them, thousands, all pulsing in unison. "They've always been there," Reeves said. "Waiting, transmitting, you just couldn't see them before, but now you can. Now everyone will." I lowered my gaze to the new tower, its impossible architecture writhing against the night sky, its blue light beating like a heart, my heart, our heart, and I finally understood. I wasn't just the receiver anymore, I was becoming the signal.